Hey guys! So, in this video I'm going to touch a little bit on something that I've heard a million times and something that I think is, well, I want to give you a little bit of perspective. And what is that thing? Enterprises and enterprise level development, and how a lot of developers, especially so-called rockstar developers that I meet, have this let's call it a frustration with how slow things move in the enterprise world. So let's get into it. Now, I have by no means worked at the slowest moving types of enterprises, but the thing is that I think we need to address something here. And I think that it's an important thing to I'd like to give you a little bit of perspective on this, especially if you are a junior, because the thing is that when you haven't worked in these different environments and you don't really know the reasons for certain things, it might not be so obvious to you why things move in a certain way or why things work in a certain way. And as somebody who has been working at an extremely small company, at a few mid-sized companies and a really large company, I'd like just to try to give you a little bit of my take on why things work the way it works, because it may not be so obvious to you. So let's start by talking about a small company. Really, we're talking anything between, you're a single individual up to say 20 people or something like that. You haven't stabilized. You don't have all that much in terms of stability. Let's just call it that, right? So when you're at that scale, usually what's happened is that you're dependent on speed, producing things quickly and things of that nature. Now the issue with this, or rather the benefit, let's start with the benefit. The benefit of this is that you can produce things much quicker. That's where the startup world comes from, like startups and all that stuff. That's all about this. Now the benefit here is that, as I said, you can iterate quickly, you can innovate quickly, you can come up with new ideas. So the requirements for you at that scale is to be very quick. And why is that? Well, to put it bluntly, you don't have quality. Or you might think that you do. You might have this idea, some startups try to go for quality and they usually fail, or they have extremely skilled programmers, or they have an extremely easy product that just does it. It's very tricky to get quality at small scale. The reason why it's hard to get quality at small scale is because, as I said, you have to work very quickly. You can't afford to take it slow and to be methodical and keep up the quality, because it will simply take too long. And what's interesting about this is that that's the sort of environment I meet a lot of so-called rockstar developers. And the thing is that the sort of software that they develop is the sort of software where I have a few subscribers who are like that. I know who you are. I have no idea where you work, but just by looking at your comments, I think I pretty much know what type of software developer you are. So from their perspective, who work in the sort of enterprise world where quality and you write the sort of software that, say, Google and Facebook and these sort of companies, not just them, IBM or these massive super companies, that sort of software. When you have these people have a perspective on the startup world and so forth, to them it looks very chaotic and it's just a big mess. And to a point, it actually is very true. I can speak for myself and I can say that when it comes to working at this scale, it is absolute chaos. It's really great. It's great fun. You're innovating. You have all this freedom, right? But it also comes with a lot of chaos because, as I said, software development and this sort of thing is if you want things to always work and you want things to be high quality, you cannot move quickly. It's not possible because software development is that complicated. It is honestly that complicated to get things perfect and really get things right. So let's flip it over and say, all right, so the enterprise world, why are they so slow, and what's the issue there? Well, the thing is that if you consider the difference in organization structure and you consider the difference when you're at really large scale, you have a really big product, you can't, and you want to be able to move as quickly as the startups, but you can't, because usually the system that you're maintaining is that much bigger and that much more complicated. And not only that, the organization itself is massive. I mean, if your boss's boss's boss needs to have an opinion on the stuff that you do, that's going to take a lot of overhead time. You have people who needs to schedule and synchronize, and you're going to have tons and tons of overhead, which affects the release process. It affects your ability to make decisions quickly. Now, a lot of big companies, they want to mitigate this as much as possible. They have entire departments just dedicated to trying to figure out like how to optimize things, and that's what your manager is there to do, is to do these sorts of things, right? Now, the issue is, as I said, that when you are at this large scale, you have so many people need to synchronize and have opinions about absolutely everything, and is that necessary? Well, many times it is, unfortunately, because if you consider it, I mean, I'm pretty sure that if you could keep it as simple, like if a large corporation could keep it as simple as you can keep it as like a 5-man team in a startup or something of that nature, they would. But it's not that simple, because the project is usually that large and you have that many stakeholders. And one more thing, when you're at that scale, you have secured a revenue stream. Your focus has, for the most part, been switched over slightly. I mean, if you ask any large-scale company, are you innovative? They're all going to say yes. Every single one of them are going to say yes. I'm pretty sure that the tax revenue office is going to say that they're innovative as well, because it's a good thing to be, right? But if you compare that type of innovation, or what they define as innovation, to what's happening in the absolute cutting edge, bleeding edge startup world and all of that good stuff, I mean, you will very quickly see the difference in perspective on this topic. But what's interesting is that when you're at that scale, you have that much money and that many resources, you can afford to take it slower. Now, what do I mean by that? I don't mean that some big companies take this to an extreme. They get complacent. They have this issue where it's just that the organization is so massive that most of the people, the pushers and the movers inside of the organization, managers and so forth, they stop caring about the company, because it's very difficult for a human being to feel attached. Like, this office culture and like all of that stuff is super tricky to maintain at large scale. People just don't care when you're in a really, really big company where you don't, like, you could be fired today and it wouldn't matter. Like, the organization is probably older than you are. That sort of scale is as I said, it's very tricky to keep people engaged. But the benefit is that you can actually take the time to write high quality software. And what's good about that is, and that's kind of where you come into this as a software developer. That's where I don't think it's a good mindset to have this idea that, oh, you don't like enterprises because it's so slow and so forth. Think of it this way instead. What type of software are you writing? What type of software developer are you? Because if you're the sort of person who likes to innovate and be creative and hack things together, then yeah, you should stick in the smaller companies, because that's where they will allow you, for the most part, to do that to an extent. But think about it this way: the startups and like all these, like, they only do this because they can't afford to make things high quality. They only allow you to take all these risks and all that stuff is because that chaos, that's not what the company wants. It's the cost that the company carries in order to make it somewhere, because they don't have the sort of resources that these super companies have. They don't have an entire design company to sit down and make everything absolutely perfect. They don't have that money. If they had that money, they would use it, because that sort of money is what's required to be like Google and Facebook and all of these companies. I mean, think about it just from this perspective. Every single company wants to be like these large super companies. They're all working towards being like these super companies. So when it comes to you as an individual, the problem may not be like the organization itself. It might be your perspective on how the work that you do. Because if you're only happy when you get to hack away at things and like be innovative and so forth, that's your mindset. The organization itself doesn't want you to do that. The organization wants you to produce high quality software that works and is catering to the use case that or rather the features that they want to deliver, right? And at really, really large scale, at the bigger companies, they still want that. It's just that they take the time to actually do it. Do you see the difference? Like, it's basically a situation where at large scale, they take the time to do the thing that the small scale companies want to be able to do but can't afford to do. So what I want you to take away from this is that when it comes to you as a software developer, you have to have this perspective and I think that's important, because otherwise you won't be able to. That's where people who have different philosophies about software development, I think that they kind of forget this. The sort of software that you need to write and the sort of person you need to be in order to make it in a given context changes depending on the context. In other words, you cannot have the same rock star mentality in a really, really big company unless that company is really catering to that sort of mindset. Same way if you go to a startup, you cannot be a super slow, methodical, super precise coder all the time when you're in a small startup. Sometimes you have to, but it's a different mindset. And that's what I want you to remember. It's a mindset thing, guys. Big companies are not slow. They're taking the time that is necessary. They're moving as fast as they can given the circumstances. And the startup companies are chaotic because they have no choice. They have to be in order to make it to a point where they can be as stable as the enterprises. It's just food for thought, and have a great day.